Hello everyone and welcome to SimpleRockets 2. Now, I've got a special video for you guys today. It is finally the end of 2020, the year from hell, and I felt like it was a good time to turn over a new leaf and start a new project. So today we're going to launch a SimpleRockets 2 campaign mode series. Basically, I'm going to play SimpleRockets 2, but use all the existing systems in the game to simulate a campaign mode much like Kerbal Space Program has in its stock game. Now, no, there is not a campaign mode released with the actual game. This is something that I've come up with. I've developed my own set of rules for how I'm going to be doing it. So, the rules. First off, we need to talk about how money is going to be handled. I'm going to start out with $10 million, and then from there, I have to build crafts to complete contracts, to earn more money, and later on build infrastructure like global satellite arrays or bases and space stations to earn revenue. Any craft that I build, if it's destroyed, I've lost that craft and I have to build a new one at cost. For science, well, not everything is going to be unlocked at the start of the game. I'm actually going to have to earn my way through a tech tree by completing experiments and gathering data to unlock new technologies later on. So I'll start out with only the basics, solid rockets and planes, and I'll have to work from there. It's going to be a lot more challenging, and it gamifies the system a little better, makes it more interesting. And if I fail a mission, especially contracted missions, which we'll talk about later, I have to pay a penalty towards the client for the contract, and if I lose any Drewnaughts, I'll have to pay a settlement fee for losing them to their families. Now, there are a lot of other rules that we'll go into later. I have a ton of stuff here on this document. There's total 35 pages of information that I've written out for how this is going to work. Now, this won't be a stock playthrough of the game. I've got several mods installed that I'm going to be using to enhance the gameplay, add to the tech tree, and make things a little bit more interesting. I'm also going to be playing on the ESS system instead of the stock system. Some goals for the series: I want to establish a profitable Martian colony, more on that later. I want to visit everything in the ESS system, and I want to unlock the entire tech tree. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, hold on, doesn't that sound a lot like Scott Manley's Interstellar Quest series that he did a long time ago? And the short answer for that is no, it's not. Don't say that. Yes, there are a lot of similarities between what he did and what I'm trying to do, but one of the big differences is the idea of building space infrastructure and taking a more realistic approach to what an actual commercial spaceflight company would do. A lot like SpaceX developing the Starlink system. Part of the goal of this series isn't just to unlock the tech tree, it's also to build and expand and explore the universe. Now, with all that out of the way, let's kick things off with our first mission for the series. Now, for our first mission, what we're going to be building is something called a sounding rocket. Sounding rockets are small, usually very simple solid rocket motor powered rockets that carry simple scientific payloads on suborbital trajectories into the atmosphere. Now, in this case, we're going to be using two barometers on the sides of the rocket to gather science points and use that to unlock new technologies to build our next craft. These barometers are very simple. They are just a little button and fuel tank that it's attached to with a command chip on it. And the command chip has a piece of VISI code that calculates the amount of science points you gather based on which planet you're at, what the atmospheric conditions are of that planet depending on your altitude. So we're going to put 2 on there, and we're going to take 2 measurements based on the altitude we're at. We're going to take one at the top of our flight path, and we'll take one shortly before we hit the ground on the way back down. The goal for this rocket is to be as cheap as we can possibly get it. So we're doing a very small rocket motor, no extra parts for aesthetics, just the fins for flight control and the barometers. And the reason is because we're in campaign mode, the cost of that rocket is going to be lost. Because this sounding rocket is going to crash on the ground, I'm not going to recover it to send it on future missions. It's a one and done kind of deal. And so we don't want to waste money building an overly complicated or overly powerful rocket to do a very simple, basic task. So this rocket is going to cost us as low as possible. We're going to go for $329,000, which seems like a lot, but for our first mission with $10 million in our budget, it is something we can manage. Alright, so here we are on the launch pad. Now I'm just going to take a minute to set up a few things. I want to go ahead and select the barometer command ship, make sure that it is good to go. We will lock our headings. We're just going to be pointing straight up, flying straight up, a very simple flight path, and we're off. And yeah, this thing has a crazy thrust to weight ratio. I think it was 9, either 9 or 12 for the thrust to weight ratio on this thing. So it accelerates very, very quickly. And then it coasts up the rest of the way. We are going to hit around 30 kilometers with this flight. There's the first barometer. We got 4 science points for that. Now we're close to the top of the arc, so because the atmosphere is thin up here, the barometer doesn't give us back a lot of scientific data. It actually gives us more when we're closer to sea level. Skip forward a little bit. It's just a simple descent falling towards the ground. And we'll slow down time as we get close to the ground here before we trigger the second one. And there we go. 26 points, which is a lot more. And we've hit the ground. Notice it didn't explode because we've expunged all of our fuel. There's nothing left in there. It is basically just a hollow piece of metal. So when it hit the ground, it's not as catastrophic as most people would think it'd be. So with our first mission done, I'll show you the spreadsheet that I'm using to keep track of everything. You'll see there the $329,000 for our first rocket, and it's annotated sounding 1, so I know how much it cost and what rocket I launched, and then this table will calculate my balance after each mission. You'll also see a revenue and expenses table up here. That is for the infrastructure later, satellite constellations, space stations, and bases, which can all generate and cost money on a daily basis. You'll look over here on the right, we have the Astronaut Roster, and you'll notice some of these names, Jebediah, Bill, and Bob, but they're not Kerbals, they're Droods, and I want to make it very clear that these are Droods, not Kerbals, totally different and not copyright. There's an employee roster, which we'll get into later when we're talking about space infrastructure. And the last thing that I wanted to show you was the Science Spreadsheet. Now this is where I'm going to be keeping track of all the information I gather and what I spend it on. You'll see I gathered information on Sounding 1 mission, and I spent it on the liquid rockets. Taking a look at the tech tree, you'll see we have basic rocketry and atmospheric flight at the very beginning. Now both of those and the basic solid rockets, we start out with those unlocked, but we're going to unlock basic liquid rockets, which is going to give us a lot more options when it comes to building more complicated and more powerful rockets for bigger missions. And this is a pretty involved tech tree. We have hypergolic fuels, nuclear engines, and superluminal travel, or faster than light travel, at the very end of the tech tree. So there is a lot that we will be working on in this series, and I'm very excited to get to it. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you in the next video. Fly safe.